Hi friends, welcome back to Premo Cooks. I'm Danielle Premo. Today I'm going to show you how to roast winter squash, and I have two varieties for you, Delicata and Butternut. There's a lot of varieties of squash and I'll talk about those at the end of the video. For now, if you're going to be following along, set your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Line a baking sheet with some parchment paper and get your cutting board and your squash out, and let's do a little prep work. Now we're here. Okay, Delicata, Butternut, it's a big old baby. So I'm going to show you today how to do a really easy method of roasting squash, and this works for any type of squash. What you want to do, no matter what variety, is we're going to cut the top off where the stem is, because you don't want to eat the stem, obviously. You also cannot cut through the stem. I tried when I first started cooking, and I chipped a little nook off of the blade of my knife. So don't ever try to cut through a squash stem. That's my advice to you. I always trim the little end off too, because there's a little nubbin back there. Next, you want to cut your squash in half. Ooh. Most people that show you how to roast squash are going to tell you at this point to take the seeds out or peel the skin off, but we're not going to do that. We're going to do the easy fast method, which is just take your squash and then put them onto your baking sheet, and you'll do the seed and flesh side face down. Gorgeous. No need to do anything else. We're just going to stick this in the oven, and obviously these little Delicata squash are going to cook a lot faster than the butternut, so I'm going to set a timer for 20 minutes, and then we'll most likely pull them at that point and continue roasting the butternut squash. All right, it's been about 20 minutes. We're going to check these squash. So these ones are definitely not going to be done yet. I want to check the Delicata. So what we're looking for is a knife being easily inserted without putting any work into it. And this one I want to try as well. Those were super easy, so I'm going to remove those. But I can't, without putting pressure on it, get my knife into the butternut squash, which we already knew would happen, but I just wanted to give you an example. So I'm going to remove these Delicata to cool. And when you remove them, you want to flip them over so that the seed side is up. Let some of that heat out. There we go. And then I'm going to move the butternut to more of the center of this baking sheet. And I'm just going to use my hands for it, even though it's hot. And then I'm going to put this back in the oven and set a timer for 20 minutes. Let's check on these butternut squash. It's been 25 minutes. We want to see if we can easily insert a knife now. Oh yeah, no work at all. As with the Delicata squash, what I'm going to do is remove them to a plate and flip them so the seed flesh side is up. What we want to do is let them sit and cool until they're easy to touch. Then we will move over to the cutting board, and I'm going to show you what to do with them once they've cooled. Now we have cooled squash. We will start with the Delicata. Let me show you what to do next. We have two ways we can do this with these roasted squash. Both require, though, that we take out the seeds, and do so without taking too much of the flesh along with it. Be ginger, be gentle. Now I have these two boats. I call them boats because you could stuff them. You could even take a spoon and dig out a tiny bit more flesh in here and stuff it with fried rice or veggies and a protein, whatever you want. Or you could also take these two buttes and slice them into half moons or into quarter moons. And you could toss these in some salt or season them in whatever way you wish, or put them directly onto a salad, mix them into a stir fry. Next, butternut squash. These big babies, we will also take the seeds out. So butternut squash, generally what I like to do with butternut squash after roasting them, I'm going to scoop out all the flesh away from the skin and then use it to make a soup, a butternut squash soup, or you can use the puree to put into pancakes or other things. Very versatile. Also, if you don't over roast them, you can try to peel the skin away. I'm going to cut this in half because it's so large Cut it in half again, actually. We'll do it in quarters, but you'll use a paring knife to peel the skin off. And once you have the skin off with ones that you'd like to cube, then you can cube them. And then another option with roasted squash, which you would particularly do this with spaghetti squash also if you roasted it this way, because spaghetti squash is all strings. But same with butternut, if you're using it for a soup, what you're going to do is rather than peeling the skin off, you'll just take a spoon and scoop the flesh out of skin. We have our mushed butternut squash that we can make a soup with. We have our half moons and our quarter moons of delicata that you could make a salad with. We have our delicata boats that you could stuff and make an entree with. And then we have our cubed butternut squash that you could also toss into a salad or a stir fry, or also super awesome in chili or a soup, a chunky squash soup. And now I will tell you more things if you stick around for our afterthought. Roasted squash. Where to begin? Squash in general is really intimidating. All of the winter squash varieties, they're big, they're heavy, they're hard to cut into. There's a jillion different ways that you can prepare them, but this is a really easy method to just cut the stems off, cut them in half, stick them in the oven. The winter squashes are great to add into your diet because they're full of fiber, lots of nutrients and vitamins, and they have a really low glycemic index. So I highly encourage you to use them when they're available seasonally. And winter squashes vary from summer squashes. Winter squashes include, I'm listing the common ones: spaghetti squash, butternut, delicata, kabocha, red curry, acorn. Those are really common varieties. Pumpkin. No one wants to forget about pumpkin. That's also one. And the sweet pie pumpkins are tiny ones that you use for making pies with. So this is a great method for preparing those and being less intimidated by them. Tips for picking squash. There are a few tips for picking a winter squash. Number one, important one in my personal opinion, is to check the stem of the squash. And I'm going to see if I can show you an example. I have this little butternut here. So when you're looking at a winter squash, you want the stem to be really dry and not easily moved. You don't want it to be damp or squishy. You don't want it to be falling off. That means the squash is old. This one though, there's no way that I could physically push this stem off the top. This is a great fresh butternut squash. And then second is to check the skin, the flesh, and see if there's any cuts or scars or moldy damp spots. Don't buy that squash. And then third is checking the weight. If it doesn't feel heavy for its size, it's probably an older squash that's more dry on the inside. Don't pick that one. And then, like I was saying with the varieties of squash earlier, there's multiple different kinds. Some have edible skins and some do not. Today we prepared the delicata squash, which you can eat the skin of. It's really thin, it cooks really well, you can't even tell it's there, and you get a lot of nutrient content from the skin. Acorn is another one you can eat the skin of. So those two you don't have to worry about peeling in any way. But butternut squash, spaghetti squash, kabocha, red curry, pumpkin, the skins are really tough and you don't want to eat them. So you're going to end up removing them at some point in the preparation process. I hope that you find some inspiration to at least try working with them at home, because most people often don't just because they seem scary, but they're really not that scary. They're pretty fun and they're really good for you, so give it a try. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. I'm sure there's lots of things I didn't cover. Oh, one last thing I wanted to tell you. In hindsight, I would have done the butternut squash differently. So I should have cooked the cubed one for a little less time, and I should have cooked the mushy one for a little more time, but instead I had an in-between version that made it hard to cube because it was a little overcooked, and one that was hard to mush because it was a little undercooked. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And good luck to you at home. I hope you get some more squash in your diet. Thanks for watching. Hey y'all, if you didn't know, one of the best ways that you could support my husband and I doing Premo Cooks, if you like our content, would be to like, subscribe, or comment. Any of those things or all of those things would be super appreciated. Thank you for watching. This is me and the squirrel.